All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us on this Friday morning for me, afternoon for you both, right?
Yeah, as of a
Yeah.
minute ago.
As of a minute ago, an afternoon. Awesome. So thank you all so much for being here. This is an alumni spotlight, and we have two alumni today, which is awesome. So really quickly, if you've been here before, you know the drill. Say hello in the chat, share your LinkedIn, let us know where you're from, all that stuff. If not, do the same thing. Let us know. You know who you are. Where you're joining us from today. I would just love to get to know you. If you have any questions along the way, please post them in the questions tab, which can be found in the bottom right corner of your screen, and then we'll try to get to them at the very end. But I am Emily. I am the community manager for Designlab. Many of you probably have seen my face in these events. So I'm very happy to have two other folks here with me. I have Max and Emily from Troupe, and they are, like I mentioned, alumni, and we're here to talk about their awesome journeys through UX Academy, but also what they're doing now, because it should be very inspiring for most people. So I'm going to hand it off to, we're going to start off with other Emily today. So Emily, would you like to introduce yourself? And then we'll have Max go.
Sure. I'm also Emily, and I'm currently a product designer at Troupe. It's a travel tech company, and we're currently building a app to help mitigate the issues with group travel planning. And also, obviously, former alumni of UX Academy, Iker cohort. So excited to be here.
Cool. So I'm Max. I am the lead product designer at Troupe. Emily and I are two peas in a pod. We spend all day together online and in person 2 days a week, helping to untangle all the headache that comes with planning group travel. So if anyone's ever tried to travel with more than I'd say 4 people, you're probably intimately aware with how difficult it can be to balance everyone's opinions and feedback and all of that. So that's what Troupe is trying to solve. We are in sort of like a soft launch beta format right now. The iOS app will be released in the next couple of weeks, but anyone can go to troupe.com and check out what we're building. It's a web app, so all you need is a browser.
Wow, you say that so seamlessly and smoothly. I don't think I could ever do something like that. But
Max
it's been nearly 2.5 years. So if I didn't have the elevator pitch down at this point, I'd be in trouble.
That is awesome. Well, you know what? Let's start backwards a little bit. We already mentioned Troupe. And I would love for you guys to tell everyone here why Troupe is so, I guess, special in the sense of how did it come to fruition? And, how did you guys get to where you are today?
I can probably start with this one. So way back in 2017, I was working at Google selling millions of dollars of YouTube ads for Hershey's chocolate and a large liquor conglomerate by the name of Diageo. And that by that point, I had sort of come to terms with the fact that I was tired of selling software. I wanted to design software. So I quit my job and enrolled in UX Academy. I think my first day was January 21st, 2018, I want to say, or January 15th. Took my time with the full-time track. I think I extended it a couple times because I was working remotely and traveling. And as part of my final capstone, I decided to build a prototype for a group travel planning app that I named Troupe. It was based on a lot of experience with just trying to sort of herd the cats when it came to getting my friends together to agree on where to go, where to stay, all of that kind of stuff. And I used that prototype to get hired at my first job at a B2B marketing company here in New York called Percolate, which has since been acquired by a company called Seismic. Kind of just kept my portfolio up on the internet, didn't think much about it, would randomly have recruiters reach out to me about it. And about 1.5 years into my job, our CEO, Alex, reached out to me with a very nondescript email saying that she was a serial entrepreneur looking to start her next business venture and she needed a product designer. So I responded thinking it was sort of a boilerplate email that went out to a bunch of people and said sure, happy to chat. I'm actually going to Spain for a little solo time in 2 days, but when I get back, let's talk. And she responded immediately and was like, that sounds lovely, love Spain, but if you could chat before you get on the plane, I'd be very curious to talk to you. And I was like, all right, this woman is either crazy or there's something I don't know, so I may as well give her 30 minutes of my time. So I actually went back to the original email, and it says something like, hey, Alex, I've worked in sales before. I can see that you have as well. I'll take the bait and let's chat for 30 minutes at 3 p.m. So we got on the phone and she informed me that a major American travel brand had recently decided to spin up a company focused on group travel planning. She had been appointed the CEO. She was looking for a product designer to sort of take things to the next level and start building this company. And the company was currently called Tribe. But when she came on board, she wanted to rename it Troupe. And so when the lawyers did their due diligence on the name Troupe, the first thing that came up on Google Organic Search was my prototype for a group travel planning app by the name of Troupe. So she reached out to me to see if I was actively working on the project. I said I would love to, but I don't have millions of dollars and I don't know how to write Swift, so I can't code the prototype myself. And that kind of kicked off a series of events where like we chatted for the next like 6 weeks, and she slowly convinced me to leave my job and jump on board with her. So that was February 2020. And then you guys all know what happened in March of 2020. And then about a year and 3 months later, Emily joined. At that point, I think it was me and 8 engineers. So like a 1-to-8 ratio. It was just becoming untenable. And we reached deep into the Designlab community to look for someone who was hungry for their first job as a product designer. And we landed on Emily, and it was the best decision I made all of last year. So that's where we are today.
I have an awe moment for sure. Well, Emily, like ever since you've joined, or I guess like, what, like, is this your first product design job after UXA? Ooh.
It is, yeah. Yeah, and really, honestly, thanks to the Designlab community, it's really what brought Max to me and Troupe to me, and it's such a valuable thing to have, I think, because like during the job searching process, it was pretty tough. I'm sure like students who are going through it right now or who have gone through it understand the rejection rate is pretty high, and networking is so important. So like having that community in Designlab was critical in how I landed my first gig. Yeah.
Yeah, I also just want to say the Slack community has been so valuable in terms of like looking for promising young talent. I just want to give a shout out to Yukimi Harada, who's on this call right now, who Emily just had a baby and is going on maternity leave next Friday, actually. And we needed someone to temporarily step in and backfill her position. And the person we ended up hiring is also a Designlab grad, but Yukimi was neck and neck in that last interview. And we're going to get Yukimi hired because she's incredibly talented and I believe in you. But the Designlab Slack is where I always go first with the job postings, and I always get great results in terms of people coming through who just like have raw talent waiting to be formed.
Okay, so I know this is going to be a burning question that's going to come up. So we'll just dive right into it. When you were initially hiring before Emily came on board, you mentioned going deep into the Designlab community. What were you looking for at that moment in terms of like finding someone to join you as a designer?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think so much of being a design team as small as we are is really finding complementary skill sets. And so I was really looking for someone who had really strong visual design chops. And I think Emily and I are really good yin and yang for many reasons, but I'm sort of representative of the career changer who went from like a completely different industry into design. And so I have my own sort of imposter syndrome that comes with that. But Emily is someone who is like very traditionally on paper, like went to design school, like worked as a graphic designer for a decade. And so I'm sure she probably has her own imposter syndrome and deals with different things because we all have it and it's never going to leave us. But I learned early on that my skill set was never going to be visual design. I always want to become better at UI design in particular, because I think it's so crucial in terms of making like a really polished, beautiful product. But my strength lies in like my technical skills as a designer. So like I'm the person who understands, like I'm gonna get deep into the API documentation with engineers and be like, okay, like what can we get back from the Google Maps API if someone puts in like this particular address or restaurant? Like I'm obsessed with figuring out like how the information in the UI, what the data sources are, and like what can and can't be returned, and what is feasible and what's not. Because if you waste engineers' time, that rapport suffers. And then when you need to call in the favors, they're less likely to do you the favors. So I was really gung-ho about finding someone who like right off the bat had great graphic design skills and wanted to sort of beef up their technical knowledge. And I was like, I'll trade you. tit for tat. Let's do this.
Emily, what were you looking for when you were looking for your first role before you joined Troupe?
Wow. I definitely wanted to, because I'd been working in the design field for several years. And, over the years, I've realized that doing what you love is so important, and caring about like where you work and is just so valuable. And so when after I graduated from UX Academy, I promised myself, okay, the next job that I find, I really want to care about the product. And so when I saw Max's post in the job opportunities channel, I was, and I checked out Troupe, signed up for an account, played around with it, and I was like, you know what, this is actually a really cool product, and I love the problem space that they're in, and it's something that people have not solved yet. It's huge. It's a huge problem space, but I was up for the challenge, and I was like, you know what, I'm gonna apply for this. And luckily Max saw that I had some valuable skills and reached out to me, and the rest is history, really. So for me, it was just like important to find a product that I cared about a lot. And also the work environment was really important to me. And after I met Max, I was like, and then the rest of the team, through multiple rounds of interviews, I could tell that they really valued their employees, and I wanted to be part of that. So
awesome. Well, let's stay on you, Emily, because Max touched on this, so we're gonna also dive into this other segue. But Max mentioned that you came from design. You also mentioned it as well. What made you choose to transition to UX/product design?
Yeah. So, well, first, I just want to say my college professor is here, and I'm so touched that I haven't seen him in forever. So, all of my successes, you want to call it, everything that I learned from him. So anyway, I just want to say hi, Peter Wong. You're the best. Okay. So how did I get here? I went to design school for graphic design, and throughout several years, about like 10 plus years, I worked in various organizations and also design firms. And after a while, I think I made it to like, I don't know, like an art director position. And from there, the next step is to be a creative director. Once you become a creative director, you do a lot more managing than you do like creative stuff. And it was something that I knew that I wasn't interested in. I really like to get my hands dirty and love the creative process and creating visual design, things like that. So when the pandemic hit, I had not a lot of time on my hands, but I was working from home, and I was like, this is the perfect time to figure out what I want to do with my life, because I was making a lot of lateral moves, and it was becoming, I felt like there was a glass ceiling, and I didn't know where to go after that. So I started doing a lot of research and came across a lot of different boot camps, Designlab being one of them. And I read all the reviews. Designlab was really the only one that had like really substantial reviews from students, and proven record of people getting great jobs. The work and portfolios of people I was impressed with. So I was like, okay, let me just get my feet wet. And I signed up for the Design 101 course just to see how the curriculum was like. And I loved it. And I also loved the mentor aspect of it as well, and loved my mentor. So I was like, okay, let's do this. I'll sign up for UX Academy. This is something that I really want to commit to. And as far as UX design, I've always sort of done UX design, but not realizing that I did UX design. Like I created websites for clients and things like that, and always took like odd tutorials on Treehouse to learn how to code and how to do app design, because I was like, well, what is this thing that I'm so interested in? But I never had a word until I discovered UX design, and I said, oh, that's what it is. And so then I signed up for UX Academy. I did the part-time track because there's no way I could have done the full time. It was just insane. I also was working at the time too. So so the part-time track was perfect. And yeah, and I had a really great mentor. I like Max said, his strengths lie in sort of like the technical knowledge, the research knowledge. Mine were visual, and my biggest weakness was the research aspect of it. I knew nothing about that, and the mentor that I was paired with was like a research expert. So that was hugely valuable to me, and I learned I could not have done it without him. So yeah, so I hats off to you guys for for doing really great matches with your mentors.
Oh, thank you. Oh, it makes me such a good Friday. Thank you both so much. Well, same question to you, Max. You and I actually come similar, where we are like complete career transitioners. We fell behind a bunch of times during the program. So, what was your journey like? Like, why did you decide to switch careers?
So my journey, and I will try to make this as quick as possible. I sort of jumped around after college and did a bunch of different random things. I went to work in advertising right out of college in account management, and quickly realized account management was not for me. But I liked working in a creative environment. And I found myself hanging out with like the copywriters and the art directors more than the people in like project management or account management. And I was there for a year, and then I quit my full-time job and quit my full-time job for an internship back here in New York for this very like exclusive, cool British branding consultancy called Wolf Olins. They did like the branding for the 2012 Olympics and a bunch of other stuff. And I was just so interested in what they were doing. I was like desperate to work for them. And they were like, well, we're not hiring anyone full-time, but you can come on as a paid intern. And I was like, okay. So I came on as a paid intern on the design strategy team. And a lot of what we were doing was sort of like the research that informed the direction that the designers would then take and run with for certain client projects, doing like ethnographic research and secondary research and all of that. And so the way that it would work is like everyone was paired, like one design strategist, which was what I was doing, and one designer, and we would sit side by side, and they would sort of mock things up in Illustrator and Photoshop or After Effects. And I was like, I like what I'm doing a lot, but I want to be able to do that eventually. And so I ended up then sort of getting sidetracked and got a job at Google and moved to California. And my first job at Google was answering the other side of the customer support hotline for AdWords customers for 8 hours a day, where I would be like yelled at by angry advertisers. And about, I'd say like 2 or 3 months into it, I realized that like 80% of the calls that I was dealing with on a daily basis were about the same like 5 things. People couldn't figure out how to add or remove people from their accounts. They couldn't figure out how to apply promo codes to find their billing information, things like that. And at the time, I think the AdWords UI hadn't been overhauled in like 10 years or something. Because it's such a big moneymaker, it's hard to get any changes made to it. And so I was complaining out loud about it, like to my team at one point. And I was like, it's just so unintuitive. Like everything's hidden behind these gear icons and no one can figure it out. And they were like, yeah, the UX is terrible. And I was like, what is that? And then they started to explain to me. I was like, oh, wait, this marries a lot of the things that I love and complain about every day into the same sort of like sphere of influence. And so I actually like got Google to pay for me to download the entire Creative Suite onto my computer. And on weekends, I would go sit at a cafe and take screenshots of websites that I thought were beautiful and would put them into Photoshop or Illustrator and then try to recreate them side by side. And that's sort of like how I first got really interested in like UI design. And then like 4 years into my time at Google, I was doing a side project with an interaction designer and a UX program manager to help this charity redesign their website. And the interaction designer took me aside one day after work and was like, you know, you're really good at this and you could do this as a career if you wanted to, but if you do, I highly suggest you quit and go somewhere else. Build a portfolio and try to build a product from scratch. Otherwise, it'll be like wholly like unfulfilling for you here. You'll just be A/B testing the color of a button for like 8 months at a time. And for whatever reason, that was like those were the keys to the golden handcuffs. And I was like, okay, like that's what I needed. And I started to sort of like slowly look into boot camps. You know, I started looking at GA and I did like the hour-long course and I did the half-day course. And then I was just like, I didn't feel good about it. I didn't like the portfolios. So I started to do some more research and I came across Springboard. And I was like, okay, this is cheaper and the portfolios are better. And then I started stalking people on LinkedIn, as one does. And I reached out to this woman with a portfolio and I was like, hey, just wanted to get your opinion on Springboard. And she was like, it's great. I'm really liking it, but I'm actually doing a class with this other company called Designlab that I like better. And so then that's what led me to Designlab, saw their portfolios, saw they had the best jobs and the most impressive portfolios. And I was like, okay, I think this is the one for me. And that's what convinced me to pull the trigger and kind of fully gear myself towards product design as a career.
Wow. I wish someone at any of my jobs told me that I should go quit and just have a better life.
Yeah, they
Right?
just
We need
hand me the keys.
Okay, cool. No, thank you both so much for sharing that. This question in the questions tab from David is actually, it segues nicely into like, you know, what we learned at Designlab. So for everyone who's here, if you're not familiar with the curriculum, we're broken up into two parts. So we have phase one, phase two. Phase one is where you learn literally all the fundamental building blocks of the entire design process. And then in phase two, you get to work with your mentor and try to figure out what parts of the design process actually work with your capstone projects. So David's asking, and I'm going to kind of phrase this in the reverse way, from phase one in Designlab, where you learn the full design process end to end, how does that compare to your daily design process at work?
Emily, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so I think, well, I think I can only speak to sort of like my experience at Troupe right now. And I think working for a startup is totally different than working for an enterprise. With our process, you know, the things that we learned in Designlab, the process, we do use it, but there are times when things need to be quickly designed and, you know, get out the door, that sometimes we have to just skip steps and use our best judgment based on user interviews and other data that we have to get things, you know, out the door, work with engineers. So it's a very quick, fast-paced process. So not saying that like, you know, we don't use it, we do use it. But I feel like if you worked at an enterprise or a larger organization, that they're more strict with the way that the phases go versus like a startup. Startup is very like fast moving.
Yeah, I would agree. I think so much of what you learn in Designlab is sort of like the theoretical application of like an idealized linear version of design. And it's the difference between like reading something about something in a book and actually trying to do it in real life. And in real life, you're like, these customers are writing in about like this particular feature making no sense. Like we need to figure out a fix in the next like 3 days and get it shipped before the weekend. And especially at a company of our size, which is only 13 people, like so much of what we're doing as well is also designing the process and revising the process as we build the product. So we are lucky in that we are constantly kind of like self-evaluating, like, okay, what went well with this feature from a design engineering collaboration perspective, which is always something that we're working on because it can always be better. And so we're kind of simultaneously trying to like redesign the process and also build features at the same time and also interview people and, you know, derive insights from the interviews while engineers are pinging us like, hey, can you QA this? Is this padding correct? Like what's going on in this Jira ticket? It's chaos in the best sense of the word, but it is truly chaotic sometimes.
What were, and you know, you guys can figure out who wants to go first, but what were your biggest takeaways or learnings from Designlab, and what would your advice be to folks who are just starting the program, and how can they make the best and most of it?
Ooh.
Wow.
Loaded question, I know.
I think that if you don't come from a traditional design background, that it's so important to take at least a foundational course to learn visual design. You know, it was something that I did because I wanted to test the waters, but in all honesty, I learned a lot because, you know, being a designer, I was like, oh, I'm going to breeze through this, whatever. But there was a lot of stuff that I actually learned that I didn't know, just foundational things. And that's, with several years of visual design behind me. So so that's one thing that I would like to say, is to take if you don't have a traditional design background, is to take a foundational course in visual design. And then the second thing is to be honest about, what your weaknesses are. Sometimes it's really hard to come to terms about like what you need help in. And I knew that my weakness was in research. And, for me, traditionally, I always like to take the easy way out and, breeze through things. But this time I really wanted to challenge myself. So when I filled out the survey of like, what kind of mentor are you looking for? I was really honest in all of my answers. And that's how I got the mentor that I had. And it was extremely challenging. He was really good at what he did. He constantly pushed me. And I feel like that's what made me a much better designer.
Yeah, I would say my suggestions would be, know what your goals are going into it, like very early on. It's not something that you can partially commit yourself to, especially if you're doing the full-time track. The full-time track will kick your ass. But depending on what your goal is, like if you want to get hired, like if you stay committed for like 4.5, 5 months, you will get hired. It's never going to be harder. I always say this to people, it's never going to be harder than getting that first job. Everything in theory will be easier after that. It's just finding that person up front, like the manager who's willing to take a chance on you and sees the raw talent that they want to like shape. And so much of, what I think people are looking for with people who are trying to get their first job as product designers are like, are they genuinely interested in this field as a career? And do they feel really passionately about something? And so, with my portfolio and my trajectory, whenever possible, I went off book from the like prescribed assignments. I think I noticed after the first capstone that there's like a little line at the bottom of all the briefs that says like, or you can do whatever you want, just talk to your mentor. And I was like, great, I don't want a cookie cutter portfolio. I'm going to do my own for like everything from project 2 on. And I think they told like a cohesive story as well, because I'm a travel fanatic and pretty much every one of my projects that I did were all travel related, so that when I was presenting my portfolio to get hired, I was a subject matter expert in the industry, just because I'm so like acutely aware of all of the problems. So I think there's a huge benefit to choosing your projects around things that will help you stand out, so that it's not something that like if other Designlab graduates are applying, they can compare someone's like new Spotify feature suggestion against someone else's new Spotify feature suggestion. Also, use real companies when possible for all of your project work. I don't explicitly say on my website that any of the project work is spec work. So I have people email me all the time. It's like, I love the work you did for Airbnb. I didn't do it for Airbnb. I just chose a project that was a feature that I knew Airbnb could benefit from. And so I tried to make it look as professional as possible, but also wanted it to focus on applications that I was a power user of and knew inside and out, so that when I'm presenting and the manager or the hiring team's like quizzing me on things, I'm confident enough in my knowledge of the product that at least that's one thing I can be confident in, because I'm going to lack confidence about so many other things trying to get that first job. I wanted to at least solidify that sort of foundation.
Yeah, I just want to add to what Max was saying about choosing your own projects for your capstones. It's so important. That's something that I did as well, especially for my third capstone. And it's not just, you are a subject matter expert, but also when you're doing the work and all the admin stuff and interviews and data things that may not be as fun, you're going to have more interest in it than, if you were to be doing some, I don't know, cookie cutter, like, no offense, cookie cutter project that was suggested to you. And also with presentation, there's a lot more passion there, and people can tell when you're interested in what you're presenting. So that's really important.
We largely hired Emily because of the capstone that she presented, which she was extremely passionate about and held near and dear to her heart. So I think that in and of itself shone through in her presentation, outside of all of the good work that she was doing for exhibiting her research and her design process. The energy in the room was such that you could really feel she gave a shit, for lack of a better term, of what she was talking about.
Yeah, no, I can third that for sure. I am also hiring right now, looking for a junior designer intentionally. And that is 1000% true. If you are connected in some way with your project, you can also explain it a lot better. And if you are thrown questions, about things that maybe you didn't cover in your case study, you are also that much more confident in being able to like figure out what the answer can be. So it is very, very important. Not to say that you can't use a template project. You certainly can use a template project, right? But think about it in a sense of, this is my starting point. How can I make it unique to myself? How can I use this to my advantage? While we're here, I guess now that in hindsight and looking back on our own kind of job searching journeys after UX Academy, like, what were your takeaways from that initial job hunt? Like, what's your advice? I know that the market has changed. I know we've kind of talked about like rejection rates and just application rates and stuff are just much higher now because there are a lot more jobs, which is awesome. But knowing that now as professional designers and seeing like how it was when we all started, like, how's it different? Like, and how would you say, like, what are people looking for in terms of hiring, finding a job?
It's a hustle. It's a real hustle to get that first job. I mean, I remember, I think I submitted my portfolio and got approval like the first week of June. And I was like, okay, I'm going to literally hit the streets with, like my laptop and my resume for the next like 6 weeks, and we'll see what we can do. And I remember the career coach that I got paired with, who was based in London, was like, I saw your portfolio. I'm pretty sure we can get you hired in the next like 5 weeks. All I need you to do is like commit to sending like this number of applications every week. And I was like, I'm already like exceeding that. Like trust me, I want a paycheck as much as you want me to get a paycheck. So like we're going to make it work. And I took every call that I could get, like random recruiters reaching out to me, got on every screener call. Even if I knew I didn't want the job, I took every potential opportunity to hone my story, and would tell the same story over and over again, and would cut it down and dial up parts where I could see people's eyes light up, and cut out parts where I could tell that they were going silent and it wasn't registering with them. And then just really got that down pat to a point where I started to feel really comfortable with like all the questions I would get during screeners, comfortable with like the first call with the hiring manager. And then you kind of deal with the design challenge, or even worse, the take-home design challenge, which is objectively the worst part of the process if you get one of those. And then it's a question of getting comfortable with that. But I think, again, just like keeping your goal in mind. And I was like, I want a paycheck again, and I want to get paid to learn, and I want to be paid to be part of a team where we're building products that I care about and I can learn from my colleagues. And that was always sort of like the guiding light, knowing that it wasn't ever going to be more difficult than it was that summer of 2018.
Yeah, I think the single most important thing is networking. Just reaching out, even with your fellow like peers in Designlab, during your group crits and things like that. Just even connecting on LinkedIn, just so you have that support system. And like I said, if it weren't for the community at Designlab, it would probably have taken me a lot longer to land my first position. And for me, I think I struck out because when I started applying for jobs, I think it was like a weekend or something, and I saw the post from Max and applied for it. And through the interview process with Troupe, I think it was maybe like, I don't know, 3-4 weeks or something, with all the interviews and whiteboarding session like combined. I kept applying to jobs, but got rejected to every single one of them. Did not even get a screener call. So like, I don't even know how long it would have taken me to get a job if it weren't for the community. So I'd say networking is number one. There's also like really great resources like ADP List, where you can hook up with other like product designers. I think you can sign up for some time to chat with them, and just making connections. It's so important.
And a resume, a really good, really good resume. Do not overlook the importance of that. That's oftentimes the thing I look at first before I even go to someone's portfolio site. So make sure there are no typos on there, that everything's quantifiable, They're numbers. It's not just like fluffy statements and sentences that can't be backed up with data. Draw like any parallels that you can from the career you're transitioning from to the world of design, and make sure that that story is crystal clear as to why you're going from being a travel agent or working in construction or working in customer service to product design.
Max, you actually brought up something that is super important. It's being able to relate the skills from your past life to your new life, right? When you were initially job hunting, how did you make those parallels if you had to?
Well, my time on answering the phone at Google was user research. I was like, so what I was basically doing was conducting 6 hours of user research calls a day on the usability of the UI, which I could tell you after, a month's time, the top 5 user pain points in terms of navigating anything on the screen were X, Y, and Z. And so from there, you start to, propose solutions, which as a lowly customer service representative at the bottom of the big tech totem pole, no one cares to listen to what you have to say, even though you're like, I'm the one that's literally on the front lines talking to these people. So I think I looked at every job that I had had up until that point and looked for at least like 2 to 3 bullet points that I could make direct connections to, even if sometimes they were a little out there in terms of the connections I was making. I was at least ready to speak to those connections should they come up in the interview, or I had them ready as talking points in the screeners. And I think you can get really creative, especially with the research side of things, in terms of just like everyday interactions that you're having with coworkers at companies that you've worked at, or any type of client or customer facing role is like hugely helpful in terms of building rapport with people on the fly when you're hopping on a Zoom call to review designs with a total stranger who's emailed in asking for a particular feature. Like that's a skill that you've honed elsewhere that can serve you well in your new career as a product designer.
Awesome. Man, there's so many ways that we can take this conversation, but I guess, I feel like everyone likes to hear the job stuff. So maybe we'll stick on that. But for our capstone projects, Max, you mentioned, try to do your projects based off of real companies, even though you're not actually working for them. So in interviews, what, I guess, is your advice on how to present these types of projects, or both of you?
Ooh, that's a good one.
I can start. So I did a lot of preparation for my presentation for Troupe. And I had a really great career coach who I was able to like walk through my presentation with, and he gave me pointers and things like that. I also based my, also through like whiteboarding sessions and things like that. There's a really great book called Solving Product Design Exercises by, I think, Artyom Dashinsky, that was super helpful to me in helping me during my whiteboarding session with Max when I was interviewing for Troupe. But in terms of like presentation, practice, choose the project that you are most passionate about, that you know the most about, and just keep practicing and practicing. I used Keynote, which was really helpful. It has like, I think, like a presenter mode and like it was like 2 different modes where you can like write all your notes in, and then like a part where you can like present to the people where they don't see anything else but like your slides. I can't remember what it's called, but like Keynote was really helpful to me. And yeah, and figuring out your timing yourself. Sometimes you can, with me, my nerves got to me, and I thought I had a 45-minute presentation, and when I did the actual presentation, I ended early. It was like 30 minutes in, and I was like, oh my God, I have like another 45 minutes. What am I going to do? So I think just being cognizant about like your time, your pace. I think it's easy to like get ahead of yourself because you're just so nervous. But if you do it multiple times, do it in front of family members, with your career coach, anybody, until you get it down, and you feel like, you feel very confident in what you have to say.
Yeah, I would agree with a lot of that. I would say definitely present the project that you're most passionate about, because the Q&A at the end will go the easiest. I would say make sure that like have a deck ready to go, whether you're presenting in Keynote or Google Slides or whatever it is, and have it be as thorough as possible. You can always put things in an appendix and cut things down and then only focus on, slides 1 through 15 for the presentation, but have, another 15 slides in the appendix should something come up. And there's nothing I like more than when like someone's presenting and a question comes up and they're like, oh, I have that accounted for. It's in the appendix. We can like touch on it at the end if we want to like circle back to that point. And I think, just thinking about my experience, my first interview for my job hunt was with Bloomberg. It was like a fully remote interview with like 4 people on the call. I was so nervous the night before. I like didn't sleep. I built this like 60 slide deck. It went horribly. And I'm so glad I didn't end up getting that job. But that one deck that I spent like all this time on, I just cut down and reused for every single interview after that. And I knew the deck like the back of my hand by the time I got to like my final round interviews for the jobs that I really did want. And so even that like wasn't wasted time. It was time really well spent up front, forcing me to get that deck done for like the first interview that got to a point where I was actually presenting things. And then by the time I presented that, 15 times or so, it was a total breeze. And then also choose a project that I'd say shows a real breadth of skills. So I think for people in Designlab, like Capstone 3 is probably the best option, just because it's a full like end-to-end prototyping and sort of concepting phase. So you can really show every aspect from like visual design to research to prototyping to animations to branding. That's probably your best bet.
And I just want to add one thing. I know this isn't really like about presentations, but it is about like the job hunting and the job interviewing process. But the whiteboarding session, whatever company you're interviewing for, like get to know their product as much as you possibly can. If you can sign up for an account or download it or do whatever, like do what you can, play around with it. Write down all your questions or potential issues that you find with it, because when it comes to the whiteboarding session, it's going to come up. And if you sound like you already know the product, that's a huge advantage.
Yeah, I agree.
Emily, you brought up group crits earlier, so I always shamelessly plug here because I feel like that's just something that, at least from alumni who I've spoken with, where, they really kind of attribute their success to group crits because of just the nature of the session. Like your takes on group crits, like how valuable did you feel that they were? What's your advice for people going in who may actually be very nervous about presenting their work for the first time? It is very daunting for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely nerve-wracking for anybody to present their work. It takes a level of like vulnerability to take in constructive criticism and not feel like you're being personally attacked. So my advice is to just, if it's your first time going into a session, I think it depends on the moderator. Some moderators are like pretty easygoing and they won't make you share. It's hard to figure out which ones those are, but like, I think they also give you a chance to go in and like observe if you want to, just to like get a feel of like what happens. But it's really not as scary as it seems. And for me, like I found it valuable to see other people's work and how they approached to solve problems with within the projects that they were doing, which also gave me ideas of how I could solve issues and in the projects that I was doing. So it's a exchanging of like resources and thoughts and opinions, and also like connecting with your peers and networking. I think that was the biggest part, is the networking aspect of it. But also just like being able to be comfortable sharing your work, because when you are a product designer, you will have to share your work. And sometimes it's not going to go as you planned or as you hoped. And you learn those skills of like how to defend your work, why you make the choices that you make, and based on whatever research that you've come up with, or user testing that you've done, and those are really important skills to have.
Yeah, it's a really good exercise in being vulnerable in like a controlled environment. and learning to take constructive feedback in a way that's productive and emotionally neutral, I would say. I think the other thing is, at least for me, it was like a huge motivator to go to some of these group crits, and all the former architects, all the former graphic designers, because there's a ton of them in like every cohort, it seems, always came with these like insanely beautiful UIs. And I was like, oh my God, like next time I go to the group crit, I want my UI to look like that. And so for me, it was a great motivational factor more than it was like an intimidating sort of audience to present to.
Max, I feel like we live like the same life, because my group crits were the same way. So Patrick, who is a mentor at Designlab, he was one of our original group crit facilitators, and Patrick is just an incredible visual designer. But that also meant that the critique coming from him, knowing that he was a mentor and a facilitator, right, it hurts. It definitely hurt sometimes. But I kind of forced myself to attend his sessions more, because I knew that was the kind of feedback I needed, versus like folks who just, yeah, it looks great. Like I feel like I don't, at least for me, it wouldn't have served me like justice and where I am now. So maybe that's my advice for everyone, attend different facilitator sessions, figure out who works for you. And, ask yourself, similar to like your capstones, what are your goals? Like, what are you hoping to get out of these sessions? Because every facilitator is different.
I'd say the same about the mentors too. I mean, I was lucky in that like I got a great mentor who was like really easygoing, but also pushed me and really helpful in terms of like teeing me up for understanding that my goal was to find a job as quickly as possible, and would like send me questions. She was like, "Do you want me to send you the questions the Facebook recruiter like asked me when I was applying for a job there like a month ago?" And I was like, "Yes, please." But there are plenty of people who like don't mesh like from the onset with their mentor, and are like too scared to say something, or feel like it's somehow like unprofessional to ask to be rematched with someone. And they're just different personality types that sometimes like either don't get along, or you're best motivated by someone who does demonstrate certain traits over others. So don't be afraid to like speak up for yourself and say, I think I need to switch. I need someone who's going to push me harder, or I need someone who's going to deliver things, feedback in a way that's a little bit more palatable to how I motivate myself.
Yeah, for sure. And right, I mean, I guess the way, like how I always explain the mentor relationship, like you said, right, not everyone's going to mesh, especially off the bat. Like your mentor could be also in a different country. So it does take time, right? Even in working relationships, like with a new manager, a new teammate, whatever, it takes time. So there are countless times where I have had coworkers where I'm like, I don't think I'll like this person, and vice versa. And then 6 months later, we're like best friends. So like it can change, but a lot of that does come with patience and also very, very good communication. And at the end of the day, if you've communicated, you've tried, that's really what matters. But if it's just your initial feeling based off of something you read, that's where, we'll likely say like, have a conversation with them first, like actually get to know them as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. No, this was, you guys are so inspiring, like to me. Like I wish I did like cool capstones and stuff and like kind of like put myself out there more. So I hope, Emily and Max have been very inspiring for you all. But something I want to touch on that I like to ask every alum about, and not just in relation to what we're doing, what you do now, but when you were in UX8, time management.
Oof.
Oh my God.
I know.
File management, time management, all the management, project management.
Advice?
Oh my gosh. Okay. For me, I would say if you're doing user interviews, please plan them way ahead of time, like way, way ahead of time, because the issue that I ran into when I was doing my third capstone, especially, I was like, oh, I'm in the middle of this. I'm going to, I'll do the user interviews later, but they take up so much time trying to find people to do user interviews. First of all, it takes a lot of time planning your questions, and then actually scheduling the time to talk to the people, and then summarizing all of the feedback that you get. That takes a huge bulk of time. So like I failed in that regard when it came to time management for my third capstone. I had to rush through it. I couldn't interview as many people as I had hoped. So I would say definitely like just plan ahead for a lot of those things. But especially when you're trying to recruit people to talk to or do user testing and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, time management is always something that I think designers struggle with. I'd say from the UX Academy side of things, like don't be afraid to time box yourself and literally just say like, oh, I'm going to see what I can get done on this one particular thing that I need to do in 1 hour. You can always extend the time beyond that, but when you don't set like time boundaries, you can quickly find yourself in like a UI hole where you've just been moving things around on the same screen for 4 hours and you're like, oh, I have so many other things I need to do. I wish I'd spent a little bit more time just constraining myself. And I think, you know, with design in particular, constraints are actually really helpful. Creative constraints, technical feasibility constraints, like constraints help you help you boil the ocean by putting like reasonable guardrails on things. Because when anything is possible, it's really difficult to get started. And that's also like not how products are built. It's not that like you can build anything in any direction. Like there's always going to be constraints. Time constraints are going to be very real when you have your first job as a product designer, technical constraints, all of that. So better to practice that up front so you get comfortable working with that. And having to learn it on the fly as you're also learning like how to do your job. And I would also say with time management, there was something else I was going to say that I think is eluding me right now.
There's one thing that I do want to add about time management, if that's okay, if that doesn't like interrupt your thought, Max.
Go for it.
Okay, is that you know, there's obviously a full-time and part-time track for Designlab. If you start off on the full-time track and you feel overwhelmed, don't feel bad about switching to the part-time track. It is okay. A lot of people do it. Like I remember during the time, during many group crit sessions, there were so many students who were like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed with full-time track. Like I'm so behind. And they just felt pressured to stay in the full-time track. But it's not gonna, you know, eventually you will get to the finish line. But the most important thing is you don't want to rush through your work because you want your end product to be of value and substantial and not, you don't want it to be sloppy. So
yeah,
that break if you need it.
And that helped me remember what I was going to say. Because time management for the full-time track is like so intense too, with like everything being time boxed to 2 weeks, ruthlessly prioritize like what you need to get done in those 2 weeks versus what you can come back to, because chances are you're going to revisit your portfolios before you go out to job hunt anyway. So like adjusting the like pixels on a prototype to be like pixel perfect so that the button isn't like moving up and down 5 pixels when you're going from screen to screen, only spend so much time trying to perfect that for like the group crit and for like the basic version of the prototype. You can always come back and fine tune those very small details once you have your certificate in hand and you're ready to start looking for a job. So I took like a full 2 weeks, I think, after I completed Designlab to just do like resume edits, do a portfolio cleanup, go back to all my Figma prototype, or I guess at the time it was Sketch, all of my InVision/Sketch prototypes, and like clean up things that have been bothering me, but that I didn't have time because it was so go in the full-time track to actually fix. And I gave myself that window of time to be like, okay, 2 weeks to get everything tightened up, and then I can solely focus on stalking people on LinkedIn, responding to every call that I get, and really like being laser focused on getting a job.
I have PTSD from InVision. I've heard anyone mention that tool.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, I guess that actually segues nicely into the last thing I was going to bring up, which is, what are your favorite tools as designers, and has that changed? I mean, well, Sketch to Figma. I mean, obviously, right? There's more tools now, but what are some of your favorite tools and resources?
For me, I'd say Milanote. It's the only actually, and I think Designlab has a discount for students. That's actually how I discovered it, under the whole list of like products that you get discounts for. And you know, I've tried many different like productivity tools and things like that, and it never worked out for me because it was too restrictive. With Milanote, I feel like it's kind of like it's very customizable, and it's the only tool that I keep going back to keep myself organized. And I used it all through Designlab to get me through my capstones, to keep track of all of the data that all the research that I did, all the user interviews that I did, and also preparing for my portfolio. All of it was in Milanote, just like organized in there. So I would highly recommend it. And Figma, of course.
Yeah, I mean, Figma is the obvious one. In terms of like other tools, I mean, I don't know if you guys can see this, but like I'm like a crazy person with my to-do lists in here. It helps me with my time management and project management skills immensely, just taking something out of my brain and putting it on paper. So good old-fashioned pen and paper there. And then, I mean, this is like harder, but like once you land yourself a job, if your organization uses Jira, like getting to know Jira inside and out, because that's where all of the sausage gets made. Learning to write like great bug tickets in Jira is a skill that you will certainly need if you want to get changes to your product push.
User stories. Learn about
User
user
story.
stories.
Yeah. And then, I mean, also like I just rely on like the G Suite for everything. So like Google Drive for storing downloaded Zoom videos of user interviews. I obsessively take screenshots of like websites that I like and different elements on websites and keep them in a UI inspiration folder on my desktop. That's then subdivided into categories like buttons, cards, global navigation, like all these things, so that whenever we start a new project and we're like, oh, we need to like redo our card structure for like how things are represented in the UI, I can just go into that folder and I have like 72 examples of different cards from all across the internet, and I drag them into Figma, and I'm like, okay, I like this part of this component, I like this part of this component. Emily's always getting random pings for me of like annotated screenshots of like, look at this beautiful card, like look at this drop shadow, look at this label. So that's a big thing for me, is just organizing screenshots that I can then really easily access for research for UI in particular.
Do you guys have any like books or websites that you guys use for as like a resource, or things that you share if folks do ask you for resources?
Yeah, so the solving product design exercises was a huge one for me, and that's for job or interviewing, whiteboarding, and even just in general, like just going through like whiteboarding session. Like if you already have a job, you know, it's important to have. And I love the website designspiration.com or .net. I go there a lot. There's also freepik.com, freepik.com. There's a lot of great free resources there for like design templates and things like that. They also have like a premium version as well, where you can pay for you know, for their templates and illustrations and things like that. So they have like a huge a bunch of resources there. Unsplash is
Unsplash is a lifesaver.
Yeah. There's also
Flat Icon.
Yeah, Flat Icon is a good one. Unsplash has a really great plugin for, or Figma has a really great Unsplash plugin where if you install it, you can easily just sorry, I can't. My brain is if you install it, obviously you can like use it and just like quickly just choose images and switch them out and stuff. It's very convenient. There's also something called breakpoints. It's also a plugin in Figma, and you can it's good for creating different screen sizes and things like that, and switching between them. So
yeah, I think all of those are great tools. Some books that have been really helpful. Don't Make Me Think is a great, easy read about just like lowering the sort of cognitive load on users. There's a great book on microcopy by this Israeli author whose name is escaping me, about like the importance of like crystal clear product copy in UIs and tooltips and whatnot. We have a book club at work, so we're reading this book right now called Continuous Discovery Habits, which is also really helpful about how to effectively get things done with product managers and engineers, because that is a lot of what we do as well on a day-to-day. So I think so much about design and product design that is both exciting and motivating is that it's evolving at such a rapid pace that you kind of constantly have to keep learning new software, reading new books, understanding new paradigms. Atomic Design is great and a must read. And then the Google like material design resources that are online for just understanding like general structures of components and things like that is really helpful as well.
Love it. Yeah, no, I think that was such a great ending point of like, we're just here. We're always learning because things are always evolving. You can't not if you want to keep up. So any last parting words or advice for everyone who's here with us today?
You want to go?
Oh, go ahead.
I'm just responding to one of the questions in the chat from Emily about can she help out as research participants? Yes, we're always looking for research participants and guinea pigs. Shoot Emily or I a note. It's just Emily or Max at troupe.com, troupe.com. Would love to show you what we're working on, talk to you about our design process, pick your brain about things. I totally forgot the question now. I'm so sorry.
Parting words or advice?
Parting words or advice. I promise that Designlab is the best bootcamp out there for people looking to get their first job as a product designer. I promise it will never be as hard again after getting that first job. Believe in yourself, have an interesting story to tell, be passionate about what you're presenting, and everything in the job market, particularly that first one, I think happens for a reason. There are so many jobs that I was really bummed that I didn't get, or things that I got rejected from that in retrospect were such a blessing in disguise. I landed at the right place. I had a first manager who really believed in me and just like taught me everything I needed to know. And from there, just everything fell into place. So really just believe in yourself, and that confidence comes through when you're interviewing, and people will pick up on it.
Yeah. And in addition to what Max said, persistence is very important. Just keep at it. Eventually you will get there, and network as much as you possibly can. As I've said many, many times before, it's so important. And utilize, Designlab's community as much as you possibly can. It's so valuable, and it's wide ranging. So
Yep. And to wrap all that up, it's be humble. Be humble about your work. Be humble about yourself and your growth. Everyone, from what I found that I've talked to in the design community, everyone wants to help each other. Like it's been a very rare instance that I've met someone who doesn't. Everyone in this community is not just Designlab, but the design community is very supportive. But the one thing to remember is that there really shouldn't be any ego in this field.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much. I'm really excited that we finally got to do this. It's been months of planning, but I'm very, very happy. And Emily, congrats. So happy for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, yeah, again, thank you both so much. And thank everyone who's here. This is recorded. So, the same thing, it'll get on our YouTube channel. If you want to share it with other people, revisit it, rewatch it for some reminders and good advice. Definitely recommend checking that out. But otherwise, thanks, Max and Emily. Hopefully we'll be in touch soon. And then for everyone else, hopefully you found this helpful. And then stay tuned for our next Alumni Spotlight.
Cool.
All right.
Thank you, guys.
Guys,
Have a good afternoon.
take care.
Bye.
Bye.